Well, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is the Take 5 with Steven Travers show. You see, I'm already tongue-tangled. It happens. It's Christmas. Give me a break, guys. Don't write the cards and letters to Logan just yet. Let's wait till we get through this show. We're going to have some fun today. I still have a little bit of a Christmas hangover. It disappeared so quickly. I had a great Christmas. I hope everybody else did. And I don't have a hangover for the reasons that some of you might. It's a little bit different. It's like you get so much work done, and then you got to do so much work, and the next thing you know, it's over. So that's part of my Christmas experience. But with us today, Logan Landers, our producer and engineer. Logan, thank you so much for all that you do to help put the show together. And Steven Travers is with us. Steven, please save me from my Christmas debacle. Tell me that I'm the only one on earth that it works and works and works. You get all this stuff done, and next thing you know, Christmas is over.
Yeah, well, it's called a letdown. It's like anytime you get to the championship game and, you achieve the title, and then when it's over, you're like, wait, now what do we do? So it's kind of similar. Any sort of accomplishment or goal that is achieved, and then in the aftermath of that, what's next on the agenda?
It's interesting you say that. When you first said that, it's the thing that popped in my mind was the 1980 Olympic hockey team. They played in 60 tournament games to get themselves ready for the Olympics. They've got the Olympic Games themselves. They end up winning the tournament. They go to the White House. They are received by the president. They get to shake hands and photographs and all that kind of stuff. And then when it was finally time to go home, they go, now what?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do we do now? This was the greatest 4 or 5 months of our lives. Who would have thought we would win a gold medal? And next thing you know, they got to move on. So they got to experience their own Christmas. And Logan, for you specifically here in the Georgia area, tell me that you didn't have to do any work at all. You just sit, and everyone was putting grapes into your mouth and fanning you to keep you cool, just like the kings of old.
I would love to say that was the case, Harper, but I was on the road for most of the day. I live up in North Georgia. Most of my family lives near South Georgia, near the Douglasville area where Vincent's from. So I was driving down there yesterday, about an hour and a half drive, went to all the family members, went to go see my girlfriend's family, and then came right back up here. Got home around probably about 9:30 last night, so not too late, but had to wake up dark and early. We like to say at 4 a.m. to go to work this morning. So we're all on that, I think, that food coma still from all the great treats we had, all the nice sweets and just good food. But we're getting through it today, and we're here to have a really good show and talk about a lot of football, that's for sure.
Yeah, diets don't exist in the Christmas week, okay? Just go on your diet beforehand, and if you need to, afterwards. But for your Christmas week, eat, drink, and be merry. Have a great time and enjoy it. So we will do the same in terms of talking about all the football action. Guys, in terms of college football, this is the week, the busiest week of the year for a number of reasons. There are a lot of games that could be more important, maybe getting to your conference championship, being invited to a bowl game, or if you're in the playoff. We're going to talk about all of it. What a busy schedule that we have. And Steven, let me begin with you. Is there any other time of the year that you can think of that has this much action with meaningful games to where you're going to have to budget your time, you're going to have to look at your watch, you're going to have to schedule your meetings around all the different football that's going to be taking place this week?
Well, I compare it. Actually, it is a great month. There's no doubt about it. And as far as college football and football in general, yes, it's as good as it gets. I like September, October, when baseball is coming down to its playoffs and its postseason, and football, both pro and college, are going on and really starting to shape up. But, there's no question that all the football games are a lot of fun to watch. And, it's different now because you do have that extra tier of the playoffs. But it's still a great thing for a school to get to some sort of a bowl game of some kind.
Logan, that's a great point that Steven has. And one of the interesting ones is with so many eyes that are going to be paying attention to the Rose, the Sugar, the eventual Cotton Bowl, the Peach Bowl. How do you divide your time so that you're able to at least see portions of games that are meaningful to you, but yet also make sure that you have your honeydew list together so that you can schedule time to be at the ones that are the most important to you.
Yeah, I mean, you try to get as much prep work done as possible. If you have to do some laundry or put the dishes away, you try to do that as early in the day as you can, hours before any of these games come on. You make dinner, you order food if you have to, and then, like I said, if your significant other, whoever allows you, is like, hey, honey, I really want to watch this important game here, like you said, with all the big playoff matchups, then go right ahead. But those are the ones I'm more inclined to get all the honeydew list items checked off with, as opposed to some of the other bowl games we'll talk about here today. Those the smaller bowl games, and as you said, Stephen, yes, they still mean a lot to these players because this might be their only bowl game they play in their collegiate career. So it means something to them. But for the lesser talked about bowl games, I'll usually flip channels if I have some time. It's like, oh yeah, I'll check out this game between two schools I've never seen play this season, and just see what they're all about. Maybe they have some cool uniforms I could check out.
Boy, what a great point there, because I can't tell you how many teams that I would think normally. You look at Alabama, as soon as you see the helmet, you see the white stripe and the number on the side. Penn State the same way. You know exactly who you're looking at. But there are some schools that Oregon is the most obvious example. You don't know what they're going to wear every week. So it's a entourage of fashion and apparel exquisite, if you will. It's just amazing. Stephen, do you remember the time? Go back way in your deep memory. Those of us that have gray hair, it's January 1st.
Oh, yeah.
And mom and dad want to sleep in, but there's a citrus bowl, there's a gator bowl. And then guess what? There's another game after that. Then the Rose Bowl, then the Sugar Bowl, and then you've got the Miami Orange Bowl. You've got basically 24 hours of nonstop football.
I was actually thinking about that while you were talking. So you were right on my wavelength. I mean, when I was a kid, it was January 1st, and it was, the Cotton Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Orange Bowl, and the Sugar Bowl. At some point, let's say maybe the Sugar Bowl, they started playing it the night before. But when I was just a kid, it was pretty much 3 games. The one game that really made sure was did not coexist with another game was the Rose Bowl. That was the biggest game. It was the biggest game nationally. It usually probably was the best game. It usually featured USC or UCLA back when UCLA was really good against a really strong Big Ten opponent, Ohio State, Michigan. But you gotta look. I can remember very early on the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl.
Absolutely.
I got into a conversation with Scott Hunter about this because he was a quarterback at Alabama in that game, and I had certain memories of how that game was played and who won and everything about that game. And your memories are don't always hold up. And he said, no, that's not how it happened. And it was a different outcome than you think it was. But I recall that game well. It was in the Houston Astrodome, and it was Alabama versus Oklahoma. And, I'm a young person, and I really hadn't seen these two teams play that much. And it was a real clash of uniforms and colors, and it was a well-attended game and was played in a dome. And I remember the Oklahoma had this. I never really figured out the difference between the veer, the wishbone, or the option, but they had one of them, and they had a quarterback named Jack Mildren, who was not a pro quarterback, not a prospect, but a great college quarterback. So Scott Hunter versus Jack Mildren. And I remember, real quickly, these games would start and you'd watch them all day long with your dad. And eventually my mom would just be mad. Why are you just sitting here watching? It was usually nice weather, in California. Let's go take a walk. Let's walk the dog. Let's do something. Let's go play some tennis. No, we're sitting here watching Florida play, whoever. Alabama versus Texas, USC, versus Indiana or Ohio State. And I remember watching Steve Spurrier play in I guess it was the Orange Bowl. That was just some of my earliest memories with my dad.
Well, the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl. Remember when we were younger, unlike Logan, who's a millennial, and we won't count that against him, there were only 6 or 7, 8 bowl games. There weren't a whole heck of a lot. If you didn't win your conference, you didn't go. Now there's 32 different bowl games. It's almost like the NCAA tournament. Logan, do you remember the first day? Was it a New Year's Day that you thought to yourself, I can sit in front of the television all day long and no one will say a word to me because it's just going to be that way? You might go out to get a bite to eat. You got to go to the bathroom. You come back, maybe take the dog out for a second, then come back, and then a bowl of chili in your hands and a bunch of chips and your entire day. Next thing you know, it's dark outside. And you go, where did this day go?
Yeah, it's a definition of blink and you miss it. Just because, like you said, you're glued to your television or nowadays your laptop or your phone, wherever you can watch the games now. And then all of a sudden your day's over because you've just been sat watching college football all day. But it's great though. We're in the holiday season, and this is a holiday basically for all the football fans out there because you get to sit back, relax, and like you said, Harper, that this is kind of the culmination for a lot of teams. Obviously we have the playoffs now, but for a lot of the bowl games, this is the team's final game of the year. So, if you're rooting on a certain team that didn't quite make it into the top 12 or whatnot, then you can sit back and watch your team, and then whoever the heck else is playing. There's plenty of games to go through, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Steven, one thing you forgot to mention, the wing T is one of those other offenses that were absolutely dynamic back in the day with 3 yards and a cloud of dust. The veer, the option, the triple option. Don't forget that wing T. All right, guys, let's look at some of the games that are going to be taking place here. There's a lot of them. And normally on a college show, we're going to call it the Super 7. There's at least 21 of these games. So we'd have to do 3 separate shows. So instead of that, what we're going to do is just kind of dissect each and every day that we're going to have over the next week, break it down to who's playing, and get your thoughts or perspectives. So on December 26th, which is today, that's what we're filming, the Game Above Sports Bowl, which features Toledo and Pittsburgh. The Pitt Panthers, they'll be playing this game at Ford Field in Detroit. It's a 2:00 ESPN kick. The second game is the Rate Bowl, R-A-T-E, Rutgers and Kansas State. That's at Chase Field in Phoenix. That's at 5:30, also on ESPN. And then the 68 Ventures Bowl. Arkansas State from the Sun Belt is taking on Bowling Green from the Mid-American Conference. That is in Mobile, Alabama, at the old Ladd Peebles Stadium. It's now called Hancock Whitney Stadium, is where they play the games there at University of South Alabama. That's at 9:00 on ESPN. Guys, a lot of different names that we're going to have to go through. That's part of the sponsorship of the bowls now. Anything stick out to you here on tonight's games?
Well, when I think of Toledo, I think of the Toledo Mud Hens, which is a baseball team.
Yeah.
I think I've seen Toledo have some pretty good teams in the past. I think maybe they were at Division II at some point. I guess they've now moved into Division I. I do remember that in the movie Major League, the manager, I think his name was Ed Brown, who the Cleveland Indians hired, had been the manager of the Toledo Mud Hens, and he'd rather stay selling tires for Big O Tires and take over the Indians. That's about as much take as I have on Toledo at this time. And what was the other game?
Arkansas State against Bowling Green, and Rutgers and Kansas State are going to be playing.
Well, Bowling Green has a long history of having good teams, and they produced a lot of good coaches as well. So they're a program that is probably going to take a game like this very seriously, because this is their day.
Yep. Logan, your thoughts here on the Thursday games?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, you got three games coming on here today. The first one kicks off at about a little less than 7 minutes now at 2:00 Eastern with Pittsburgh and Toledo. So that kind of gets things started. Rutgers and Kansas State, the middle of the day game, right, 5:30. And then for those who like to stay up late, you can get to watch Arkansas State and Bowling Green with two schools you might not have watched before unless you're a fan of the team. But there is some good talent out there for sure. And something that stuck out to me too is the location for the Rutgers and Kansas State game. They're playing this at Chase Field, which is actually where the Diamondbacks play in baseball. So I'm curious as to the reasoning why they or what the reasoning for why they're making the baseball stadium into a football field. Made me think of the Raiders, what they used to do back with the Oakland Coliseum. So I guess that they're doing that there for Arizona. But yeah, like I said, a couple different teams here, but overall it's going to be some good slate of games to get things going here today.
Yeah, Arizona wanted to host more than one game. San Diego's done it. New Orleans has done it. Phoenix has had multiple games, and you're not going to coincide with the State Farm Field where the Arizona Cardinals plays and the Fiesta Bowl that's going to be taking place in a couple days. So they moved the field and different place to play. I'm sure the Diamondbacks aren't happy that all those turf cleats are going to be in their infield, but they're going to have to get over it. All right, let's look over at Friday, December 27th. Full day of action here, guys. We're going to start with Oklahoma coming off that big win that they had against Alabama, and then Navy with their big win against Army. They're in the Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl. That'll be at Carter Stadium in Fort Worth at noon on ESPN. That's the first. The Birmingham Bowl features Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt. That is at Protective Stadium in Birmingham. 3:30 is the kick. All these games are on ESPN. Texas Tech and Arkansas, they are going to be in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl. That's at Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium there in Memphis. Vincent, and our hats off to Vincent, who couldn't be with us today. If there's anybody that wants to have the over and under on how many times we're going to say Memphis, it's right now going to be at 3. So that game is at 7 o'clock. Another late start is Syracuse and Washington State. That's the DirecTV Holiday Bowl. That will be in San Diego at Snapdragon Stadium there at 8 o'clock. And then SRS Distribution Bowl, the Las Vegas Bowl, will feature Texas A&M and someone near and dear to Steven's heart. That would be the University of Southern California Trojan. And under the directorship of Dr. Arthur C. Bartner, the marching band, they'll be there at 10:30. That's right. Well, I know, but I'm still going to say it. I don't care. It's under the directorship of Dr. Arthur C. Bartner, and that's all I need to know because I learned that very, very early. 10:30 is the Gigamags versus the Trojans. Stephen, let's start with you. If there's any other game that means anything to you that day, we already know that the A&M, and that's going to be a good game, A&M against SC.
Okay, two takes off of that. Number one, Fort Worth, Texas is not necessarily warm this time of year. It can be in the 20s or it can be in the 60s. And they get what's called northers that come from the plains and can blow pretty hard. Now, you say Fort Worth, Texas. This is not Arlington State. This is not Jerry Jones Stadium in Arlington, Texas.
Correct. That is they're hosting a different. The Cotton Bowl is going to be in 2 weeks, but this is so Alman G. Carter Stadium in Fort Worth.
So your subject. This is Texas Christian Stadium.
Correct.
Okay. So that's my first reaction. Next, you mentioned, what was the name of the stadium in Birmingham that you mentioned?
Protective Stadium.
Now, this is a question. What happened? Is this the old Legion Field? What happened? Is their Legion Field still there? Did they tear it down? And I have something to say about that.
Yeah, Legion Field is monumental. It's legendary. Legendary Legion.
Is this what Legion Field is called now, or is it a new field built in Birmingham? And there, I don't understand why there would be, because there's no mate. I mean, unless Alabama is going to start playing a single big game there every year like they used to.
I think UAB, please forgive me, folks. I don't know this, but University of Alabama, Birmingham, who plays there, they got a deal with Protective, whatever the company is, and they renamed the stadium, and I believe that it's the home for the UAB Blazers.
Well, I hope it's the old Legion Field, and here's why I say that. because obviously I wrote the book One Night, Two Teams, Alabama versus USC. That game was played at Legion Field on September 12th, 1970. Legion Field was a game where Bama would play. They'd play a select big game at Legion Field, 1 or 2 a year. At some point, probably in the 90s, they stopped doing that. My book, right around the time that it was published, became bought by Hollywood, by a movie producer named Kerry McCluggage. And always one of the big selling points in the idea of turning that into a movie was that Legion Field is still there. It still looks the same, and you can fill it up and actually film there. And we had the perfect guy to do it, a man named Alan Graff, who actually played in that game as a lineman for USC, has since become a very, very famous second unit director in Hollywood. He has done all the football scenes for Any Given Sunday, Varsity Blues, Friday Night Lights, pretty much any football movie that has been filmed over the past 30 years. Alan did it, and he would have been the perfect guy to do the second unit, if not actually get his chance to direct. But that would have been at Legion Field. So that's why I brought this up, because I would really love Legion Field to still be there. Just in case somehow by some miracle we finally get that movie made after 22 years.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because the stadium itself, I call it a skeleton. It's I-beams and girders and X joints. You can see these giant rivets that are a part of putting a stadium like that together. And when you go from the field underneath the bleachers, and then you see all of this metal and the construction and the engineering to support all that weight. Mile High Stadium was like that too. It can be very loud. It can be incredibly boisterous, and echoes are abounding, but they don't make them like that anymore. They just certainly do not do it. Everything is covered up and it's insulated, and you've got to have Wi-Fi and LED lighting. Everything is different, but what a tremendous stadium, and one that has housed so many amazing memories. I think briefly of the Green Bay Packers. They would play an important or big game every year in Milwaukee. It was a different audience, a different market that you kept attached to the team. I believe at Legion Field and the game at Birmingham did the same thing for the University of Alabama. But if you've seen Bryant-Denny Stadium anytime in the recent future, you can just look from the inside. When it's empty, you can see the different types of concrete and how it's dried and how some of it needs to be pressure washed. They have rebuilt that into this monstrosity where why would they ever want to leave? They're going to stay on that campus, and there's no reason for them to leave because they're going to a smaller field somewhere else. Logan, any thoughts that you have in terms of Friday's games, beginning with Oklahoma and Navy and ending with A&M and SC?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'll check out the Navy Oklahoma game there at noon. Want to see Bo Horvath in action once again, the tremendously skilled quarterback out there in Navy. We know how well they did this year. They exceed a lot of people's expectations. And Oklahoma, a bit of a down year, right? Finished right at 500, but they have looked better here in recent games. So I'll check that one out. Of course, we got to support the local teams here. Georgia Tech in action against Vanderbilt. Do you think that Georgia Tech has recovered, Harper, after the 8 overtime performance from Georgia nearly a month ago? Do you think that they're well rested at this point, or do you still think they're licking their wounds a little bit?
Well, I don't think Brent Keys is going to let them lick any wounds. They're going to get ready for that next opponent, and we're going to be ready to go, especially with his contract extension. I can't imagine they waited more than 24 hours to start getting back to work, even though they had to wait for the invite. But I'm kind of excited if I'm a Tech fan. I think things are changing on the campus. They're getting bigger, faster, stronger players to want to stay there. They're no longer a run first, run second, run third team. They throw the ball very well. So recruiting-wise, they're getting the athletes. And if they can start putting a few in the pros, I think the exponential leap that they're going to take to get back to where they once were, they're well on their way.
Yeah, I think if they win the game, it'd be a nice, just kind of an exclamation point, as you were saying, to cap off a really impressive year overall for them. And of course, as you know, the late night game, I know you guys talked about USC, Texas A&M. It's going to be at Allegiant Stadium, the newer stadium out there in Vegas where the Raiders play. So a very nice stadium. And hopefully, I know you guys are rooting for SC to take that one home and end the year on a high note.
Well, Saturday's games, and again, this is the 28th of December, just a couple of days from now. We begin at 11 a.m. with the Wasabi Fenway Bowl. Steven, did you ever think that you'd be sitting there watching the Wasabi Fenway Bowl?
Is Fenway as in Fenway Park in Boston?
Yes, it is.
That's
it's
correct,
in Boston. Yes.
So much for not playing in cold weather. No, I didn't. But I want to get back just a quick note to both of you. You're in Atlanta and you're talking about Georgia Tech. If you ever want to read a really good book that is kind of about Georgia Tech football, read A Man in Full by Tom Wolfe, which is a 1998 novel, was a bestseller, and it revolves itself around Georgia Tech football and the city of Atlanta and the politics of Atlanta. So just it's 1,000 pages. It's quite a read, but I highly recommend it.
All right.
I've got my copy right here somewhere. I got to find it. I don't want to do it while we're on the air. It's called Losersville. It's about the city of Atlanta, the politics, and everything that are part of that. So, Steven, thank you for that historical backup. You have a copy right there?
Tom Wolfe, A Man in Full. Tom Wolfe is one of the finest writers in the history of literature in the 20th and 21st centuries. He's definitely one of my heroes as a writer.
Is he a little more complicated than roses are red, violets are blue, and that's what I'm used to reading.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I would pen things down. This is a little bit deeper.
Yeah, he's pretty deep. He's very well educated, and
I love it.
He was a social satirist, is what he was.
Well, we can talk about Tech for a long, long while. Why they left the SEC to leave, I get it, but they could go back someday. Wouldn't it be interesting if they end up back in the same conference with the University of Georgia, with Alabama and Auburn, and bringing back those rivalries that were so prevalent back in the 20s through the 60s and maybe even the early 70s. Absolutely amazing. All right, let's get back to our bowl games, guys. The Wasabi Fenway Bowl, that's University of Connecticut. It's almost a home game for them. They'll be going against North Carolina. The Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl. I told you we had a Pinstripe Bowl. Yankee Stadium will feature Boston College. That's right. Boston College is going to be taking on Nebraska. That's noon, and that's on ABC. So different network for that game. The Isleta New Mexico Bowl. Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns end up taking TCU. That's at University Stadium there in Albuquerque. A friend of mine named Alex Hoover, his son is the quarterback there at TCU. We wish the Horned Frogs a great game there out of that one. The Pop-Tarts Bowl, cinnamon, brown sugar cinnamon. I know some like strawberry, a few like blueberry. There's even a chocolate, but nothing beats a brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tart. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Iowa State and Miami. That's at Camping World Stadium in Orlando. Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl. Miami of Ohio against my Colorado State Rams. That will be at Arizona Stadium, University of Arizona. They're in Tucson. That's at 4 o'clock on the CW network. Go Rams. And then you can go bowling, Military Bowl, East Carolina versus North Carolina State. That's at Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium in Annapolis. So it'll be great to see those grounds, those hallowed grounds, if you will, featuring East Carolina and North Carolina State, 5:45 on ESPN. The Valerio Alamo Bowl. Alamo Bowl is in San Antonio, of course, and they will be hosting BYU against Colorado. A natural rivalry kind of kicking place there. You got to go a long way to see it, though. If you're in Colorado or Utah, you got to go to Texas. And then the Radiance Technology Independence Bowl, Louisiana Tech against Army. This is at Independence Stadium in Shreveport, where the old Independence Bowl used to be from many, many years ago. That's at 9:15 on ESPN. Logan, we'll kick it off with you. Busy day on Saturday.
Boy, you were not kidding. Harper, like you said in the introduction, this is where if you have anything you need to get done, do it early. And you might need to do it a little bit earlier, like I said, with an 11 a.m. kickoff to start your Saturday. So I might have to wake up a little bit early, get your breakfast in there, get some energy, and get whatever you need to get done around the house, because it's a lot of great football games. That's for
Get
sure.
your energy in, because you're going to be sitting down all day and not doing anything, right?
Exactly.
I get it.
make sure you get all your snacks prepped and everything like that. So you were good to go. Looking at just all these games here, it'll be interesting to see, like we said earlier, with Chase Field having a football game. Same with Fenway Park and Yankee Stadium, just a unique atmosphere of seeing that taking place. That'll be interesting to see. The Pop-Tart Bowl, always interesting to watch. They have the live mascot that they get to eat at the end. It's genius marketing. Like you said, they've got brown sugar, cinnamon, strawberry, and whatever the heck else they've got. That I think the winning team will get to pick one they get to munch down on at the end of the game. So even higher stakes for that one. Some other ones too. I mean, Colorado and BYU, that's a heavy hitter right there. I think that's going to be a good game. You get to see Shedeur Sanders potentially, Travis Hunter. So you've got a lot of really good talent there. I know we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then talk about just something falling into your laps, guys. Louisiana Tech and Army. Louisiana Tech wasn't even supposed to be in this game, but originally we know Marshall was going to be in place of Louisiana Tech. But as of this article I'm reading here from December 14th, it says that Marshall had, at the time, and I'm sure there'd be more, 36 players, including their head coach, left or in the transfer portal. So they don't have enough guys to play. So they called upon Louisiana Tech to come on and play in that late game, like you said, Harper, 9:15 in the Radiance Technologies Independence Bowl. So they're playing with house money right now, I think Louisiana Tech is, because they weren't even supposed to be here. So a lot of interesting storylines in this Saturday week slate of games.
Yeah, Army will play at any time, at any place,
Yes.
and then 9:15 is a late start, and Army will kick in by playing at any time or any place. Absolutely amazing in that one. Steven, before we go, we do want to mention something about the CU game. There's kind of something of interest. Anything in particular stick out to you?
Which game?
I was going to mention the CU BYU game after you. I want you to address what you think. Is there any one or all 5, 6 of these games? They all have your attention?
No, they don't. But there's something to be said. That's the best game of the day, and there will definitely be professional scouts at those games. And there's scouts at all these games. There are talented players. They might not necessarily be playing for the national title, but there are players throughout these rosters who will play in the National Football League, and some of them will be stars. And so there are scouts who will be watching them. Regarding Marshall, I believe you said, is not going to field a team. I would suggest finding a local junior college and let them play. I'm reminded also that UCLA a few years ago failed to answer the call and did not play in a game. Let me also remind you that once upon a time, the national championship was determined in the Holiday Bowl when in 1984, Brigham Young defeated Michigan and completed an undefeated season and was ranked number 1 in the nation at the end of the year. Let me try to think what else. Regarding the Connecticut, North Carolina game, one, I'm sure the fans will be discussing the prospects of each school's basketball team this year. However, the question is, where is Bill Belichick? Will he be? I'm certainly he'll be at the game, but he's not going to coach the team for this game. We'll be using this game in some sort of recruiting fashion. So that brings some attention to the Tar Heels of North Carolina, because as we spoke in an earlier episode, Bill Belichick is going to change the whole dynamic of college football in the Tar Heel state.
Most definitely. He is. I don't know why he's waiting till tomorrow. I know it's too late for him. Give him a week, maybe 2 before he actually calls plays. But this was already set in place, even though the team knew that they were going to be getting a coaching turnover. They wanted to get that taken care of as quickly as possible. They obviously went with Belichick. One of the things that was of interest, Logan, you mentioned all the players there from Marshall, 34, 5, 6 of them. Sam Houston State played last week against Georgia Southern. They had over 21 players that were gone. They took off, they said, we're going to go into the portal, and they had replaced a head coach too. They ended up winning that ball game against Georgia Southern. Very interesting how those guys, the 12 guys that were left over, okay, who sits on the bench? All right, Tom, you sit on the bench for right now. They went with a minuscule roster compared to normal. But they were able to put it together for this game. So congratulations to Sam Houston State last week for doing that. We mentioned the Valerio Alamo Bowl. One thing of interest, BYU and Colorado. The University of Colorado has taken out an insurance policy so that Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter have some sort of financial protection in case something happens in this game. The reason that I bring this up is not because of the financial, the distribution, the insurance policy itself, other than my question to you guys, is this going to be a feature that is more prominent, knowing that there are seniors and upper class juniors that want to leave early, but you entice them to stay with the team? Maybe NIL money would require something like that. You better play in the bowl game, but these guys don't want to get hurt, a la Carson Beck for the University of Georgia, and ruin or disperse your chances of being a first, second, or third round draft pick. Steven, let me start with you. What are your thoughts regarding not just the insurance policy, but the idea that players in a very different way are going to be protecting themselves against some sort of calamity that might occur during these bowl weeks?
It's an absolute no-brainer, and it has happened before. And I personally knew Todd Marinovich when he was a quarterback at USC, and he had a policy, I believe in 1990, which was his last year playing for the Trojans. And he had a policy in case he got hurt and couldn't go into the NFL. He did not hurt. He did go into the NFL, but he ran into his own self-made disasters. But it has happened before. And it would seem to me just an absolute natural that you would do something like that. The only question that you're going to have with these insurance companies is, what's the nature of the injury? How do you when does the policy expire, and when is the policy fulfilled? Can a player say, well, I was hurt in college, and that's why I didn't make it in the pros, and I want some money from my insurance? So that's a dicey situation. And when did the injury occur? Does it have to be an injury in a college game or in a college practice? But it certainly makes sense, and it certainly makes sense for these two players at CU to do it, because they're star players. And they're playing in a bowl game that a lot of star players like Christian McCaffrey, just right off the top of my head, didn't play when they were in college. And, you'd like to have your whole team available to you for your last game of the season.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon how this is working out. And what, Logan, if you're the third best player on CU's roster, and do you not have an insurance policy for you? You may not be a first rounder, second rounder, but you might get drafted. Would you not benefit from taking out a policy, but at what price, and the specifics that are a part of it, the doctor's instructions on whether or not it is a full case injury, is it disability, or there's so many different areas where this can go. Simply put, Logan, your thoughts.
I mean, college football now more so than ever, it's not just a game, it's a business. I mean, you're seeing that right in front of our eyes. We're talking about players getting disability insurance in case an accident does happen. And like you said, I know, Stephen, you said with Marinovich years ago, but you don't really hear about this a whole lot. I mean, this is something that's, I think, is going to happen more and more, especially with guys like Shedeur and like Travis, who are obviously going to be first-round draft picks. But Harper, like you said, maybe the guy who's your third best player on your team, who might not go first round, might go second, third round, but still has a high probability of getting drafted. I would think that they would buy into that they would get some coverage of some sort, regardless of whatever the money amount, the monetary amount may be. But I would think that if I'm a player on a team and I have a really good chance at getting drafted early round, right? I mean, I would, late round maybe, but early round for sure. I would definitely look into that and see what can I do maybe to get onto that. That way, if I do end up playing in this game, in this bowl game here, that if I do get hurt, I'm still covered. And that helps out so many different ways, not just on the field also. But it's interesting that this is happening, right? In that, Coach Sander and the AD and everyone has worked together and done this. And I'm sure that for incoming kids from high school or transfer players, this might be in their NIL contract saying, hey, I also would like a little bit of insurance here, potentially maybe not year one if you're a freshman or whatnot, but a little bit later in their playing careers, that saying, hey, I would like full coverage for 2-3 years while I'm at your school. That way, in case something ever does happen, I've got something that can help everyone out. But it's I think it's a good move from the Colorado athletic department, because this is their golden gooses right here with Shadur and with Travis. So you don't want them to get hurt. We hope that they're all going to be suited up, is what Coach Sanders said, is what Primetime said. So it seems like they're all going to be fully ready to go this Saturday. But yeah, it's I think it's a smart move though, that you're trying to protect some of your most coveted players.
Yeah, it's not a change because it has happened, as Steven mentioned just a short time ago. But I think we're going to see a lot more of this, especially when you've got NIL money that players are going to be getting, that they don't have to go to the school. They don't have to go to the athletic department. They can do this on their own. Now, they have been able to in the past. It's just interesting to see how this phenomenon kind of changes as a business portion of college football. Our Monday game, December 30th, is the Trans Perfect Music City Bowl. That's in Nashville, Tennessee. It's going to be Iowa and Missouri. Good game here. 2:30 Eastern on ESPN. That's the only day of the game on Monday. There's still that NFL takes place, and they kind of want the rights to Monday night being theirs as long as there's a Monday night game. A couple weeks after the season is over, obviously the college game will take over, and they will own Monday night, so to speak. But Steven, your thoughts? Anything on Iowa and Missouri?
Well, I'm glad to see that the trans community is now playing football. So are these men as women, or are these women as men? Thought of being. Let me just make a comment about what we were talking about earlier. It's possible that the remedy for the insurance of players might be found in what they're doing in baseball today. Over the past 10 years, baseball has restructured itself, and they have changed their minor league system, and they now have a full workers' compensation system set up for injuries for minor league players. And as college football, there have been some court cases that have held that college players are employees. And if they are employees, they can be subject to the workers' compensation system. And the workers' compensation system might be the answer here, in that you can create a statistical variance depending upon what your injury is, and also possibly how much you thought you could make. So that might be the answer regarding what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, there are tables that are out there. What I mean is that there's charts that have different numerical amounts depending on how severe the injury is and what type. Is it your hand, your arm, your elbow, your shoulders, your knee, your hips? There are different ways of measuring from a insurance standpoint an output in terms of what your rights are to receive based on the injury, the severity of it, and all that other stuff. Again, it's all kicking in. It's been in the normal workforce, and you're going to start seeing it now in what we would used to call amateur collegiate athletics. It's going to be completely different how we see things.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's look at Tuesday, December 31st, guys. This is called New Year's Eve, and we are going to be loaded with games all over the evening. The Reliquant Quest Bowl, which is Alabama and Michigan. That's at Raymond James Stadium. That's where the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play, so you're going to hear a lot of gunfire after touchdowns. That's at noon on ESPN, so an early ball game there in Florida. Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl I'm going to have a bowl of cereal, and I might have Sugar Pops just to wait and have Frosted Flakes a little bit later. Louisville and Washington. That game is at the Sun Bowl in El Paso, where the University of Texas El Paso plays. The Cheez-Its Citrus Bowl. This will be a good game, too. South Carolina and Alabama, which we mentioned just a moment ago, two of the schools that are saying, hey, what the heck did we need to do to get into this thing? Well, don't lose your third game. But the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl is South Carolina against Illinois. That's at Camping World Stadium. That also in is Orlando. That's at 3 o'clock on ABC. And then the Kinder Texas Bowl, which is Baylor against LSU. That's at Energy Stadium in Houston. That's a 3:30 kick on ESPN. So these are the pre-bowl games to what we'll be talking about in just a few seconds. Steven, let's go with you first in terms of the early games. Alabama, Louisville, South Carolina, and Baylor will be visitors in all four of those bowl games.
Well, Alabama, actually, this is an important game for them. It's an important game for their coach, Caleb DeBoer, because he has done something you're just not allowed to do, and that's lose 3 games at Alabama in the course of the season. He loses a 4th game in a bowl game. He could be out of a job. Now, obviously, he's got a contract. I don't know how many years it is, but it's probably at least 3 or 4. So that's a game that he's going to want to win, and he's going to really press his team to play. Washington is playing who else did you say?
Louisville and Washington in El Paso.
That's a good game. That's a good game. Louisville played USC in a bowl game a year or 2 ago, and it was a good ball game. Washington is a team that obviously has been in the Pac-12. I'm going to get to what I'm going to say about the Pac-12 later when we talk about the big bowl games, the playoff. But that's another team that really is going to want to finish strong, like USC did last year when they had Miller Moss and they won their bowl game, which I think was either in Las Vegas or the Holiday Bowl. And so you always want to win that bowl game. You always want to go into the recruiting season with a little bit of momentum.
Now, I'm reminded a couple of years ago when he was first getting into his broadcasting, David Pollack, who played at the University of Georgia. He's been with ESPN for years on College Game Day and other obvious college experiences that he's been a part of, different shows. And I remember him being just asked kind of off air. It wasn't a real formal interview type thing, but he was just saying, man, there were some guys, they went out late every night. They didn't take it real serious. It wasn't like it was a big deal. They wanted to have the experience, but the hard work and winning that ball game was secondary. And that can happen anywhere. A coach's ability to rein that in and make sure that everybody focuses and gets the win and keeps the program going in the right direction. That's not always easy to do. Before we go on to the playoff, Logan, final thoughts here about the New Year's Eve games.
Yeah, like I said, good slate of games here. Obviously, Alabama's playing at noon, so that'll, like I said, if you're Kalen DeBoer, better hope you win because there's going to be a lot of upset Tide fans if they drop this one to Michigan. And if you're Michigan, hey, you're hoping you can, pull off a big upset in this game. I'm going to be watching the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl with South Carolina, who came on just red hot at the end of the season, right in the SEC, and there were some chances that they could have maybe been in the top 12. They just missed out. So I'll be checking that out with Illinois, who also had a really good season as well, finished 20th in the nation. And of course, Baylor and BYU. That'll be a nice game. Just a nice little palate cleanser, I think. I like LSU. I think that they have a solid program out there, but I think that'll be a good game to get us prepped for one of the bigger games later on in the day, Harper, if you want to go ahead and take that one away.
Yeah, well, later that evening is quarterfinal game number 1. That'll be Penn State taking on Boise. That's at State Farm Stadium. That is in Phoenix, just outside of Phoenix and Glendale. I was surprised last week at how many games were blowouts, and I'm calling it very fragilely a blowout, but none of these games were tight, in my opinion. And the home team was dominant in all 4 of last week's games. Penn State, to me, guys, proved that their defense is for real. Everything that SMU tried to do was a struggle, and it showed in the final score. And now they're going to go against a Boise State team. They don't have as much time to prep, but I think they're going to put an extra guy in the box and keep Ashton Genty from getting too far along the line of scrimmage. The thing I do like about Boise is they've had other teams try to do the same thing, and they loosen them up by being able to throw the ball. Their quarterback has done an excellent job this year of not maybe equally balancing, but when you don't give it to Ashton Genty, you've got a play action pass over the top, you get the first down. So first game, obviously, number 6 Penn State is going against a team that got the first round bye, and number 3 overall, Boise State Broncos. So, we'll start with you, Logan. Let's begin with your comments here on this game.
Yeah, with Penn State, obviously last week the whole narrative was around, can James Franklin finally get it done? Can he win a meaningful game? And he did just that. They dominated SMU, and a lot of people were saying, oh, they shouldn't have made it and whatnot, and oh, this is why so and so should have got it. And it's like, look, that discussion ended weeks ago. We should have moved past that, but. Like you said, last week's games were a bit of a letdown, I would say. It was good football, but I was hoping for closer matchups. Like I said, Penn State, they have a really good program out there. The running game was top-notch, ran for over 200 yards. The defense, like I said, they're only able to limit the Mustangs to only 10 points, so that just goes to show how good they are. But I think, like you said, Boise State, who's getting the ball pretty much every snap, it feels like, and that's Ashton Genty, Heisman candidate. It's going to be one of the top running backs taken in the draft coming up. So that one I'm looking forward to. I think that this is going to be a good matchup. Can they stop the best running back in the country? We'll see this upcoming Saturday.
Steven, your perspective here. Anything about last week's games, or we'll stick with just the New Year's Eve game for the moment with Penn State and Boise?
Boise is a college football program with a perpetual chip on their shoulder. They're not considered the top tier, but they really are, and they have been for 20 years. I certainly remember that game against Oklahoma back around 2006 or 2007 when they won on the last play on a flea flicker or something, or a
Statue of Liberty.
Statue of Liberty play, and then the guy proposed to his cheerleader girlfriend after the game. I've never seen more drama in college football than that. So you're now into the neutral field situation, and both teams would benefit playing on their home field. They both are in cold weather environments, but that's not going to be a factor here. I like Boise State. I like their ability to maybe show something in a game like this, because this is their chance to be there. They've been sort of left out of the party a lot over the years, but they're not left out of the party this year. So they're looking at it like let's elevate, kind of like where Miami was, before the 1980s. They were Division I. They were good, but you didn't really think about them that much. So I think they want to be in that discussion.
It's very interesting you put it that way. I look at Boise as we are full of 3-star guys, and we're always going up against a 4 or a 5-star team. And we are going to prepare better. We're going to work harder. We do have a chip on our shoulder. It's a good one. It's one that propels us and it motivates us. And we are not there yet. You look at their stadium, not the blue turf. I'm not criticizing, but they've had to patch bits and pieces together. Even that, it wasn't built big enough for the market, but the city has grown because the program has grown, and the amount of support that they're getting for them to be there. This isn't a fluke, guys. I mean, you win all your games, you should be invited, period. And they are. So let's see how they play against really one of the bigger programs and bigger teams. I think Penn State is rolling into this. They had a chip on their shoulder in terms of the Big Ten. They're always looking up at Michigan and Ohio State, and I think this might be the year for them where they go, you know what? We're not even going to look at them anymore. We're just in control of our own destiny, and we're going to see how the chips fall. So be very interesting game how this is the last game of the year, if you will. And New Year's Day starts on Wednesday, January 1st, with a 1 o'clock ESPN kick. This is the Mercedes-Benz game in Atlanta here, where number 5 Texas takes on number 4 Ohio State. The second game will be at 5 o'clock. That's Ohio State versus Oregon, and that'll be at the Rose Bowl out there in Pasadena. 104,000 people will be there for that one. And then later on that evening at 8:45 from Caesars Superdome there in New Orleans, the number 7 Notre Dame Fighting Irish will take on the number 2 Georgia Bulldogs. A lot of football to go over, guys. Logan, we'll begin with you, and we'll kind of round robin off of one another in terms of what game would you like to discuss first?
We'll just start with Georgia Notre Dame. Might as well start with the team in the hometown here in Atlanta. A lot of storylines behind this one. Of course, the news came out a couple days ago that Carson Beck is out for the season now with a torn UCL. Hopefully he recovers nicely, and they said he's expected to start throwing again around the springtime. So hopefully he can rest up during the winter and get his throwing motion and strength back and ready to go. But Gunnar Stockton out of Rabun County, Georgia, he's going to be the hometown guy, hoping to lead this Bulldogs program back to another national title. It's going to be a little bit tougher now. It's like how we talked about last week, Harper, with the Falcons, and you have a brand new quarterback, and are you going to open up the playbook, or are you going to be a little bit more limited in what you're going to run? Well, the thing with the Falcons is that's the regular season. This is the college football playoff, so the stakes are a lot higher. But I'm curious to see how Kirby is going to prep Gunnar and also just the rest of the team with this, obviously, this big change here coming into this ball game. But we know he's done a tremendous job. I have no doubt that he'll have them coached up to the best of his ability. And for Notre Dame, last week they beat Indiana in, I guess you could say, the closest game, 27-17. But, I mean, at halftime it was 17-3, and it was the fourth quarter when Indiana kind of started to come alive and get going, but too little too late for the Hoosiers, and their historic run comes to an end. Notre Dame, I mean, they proved last week in that win that their running game with Jeremiah Love, who just ran the ball all over the place, and how tremendous he is, 108 yards on 8 carries. That's big play potential right there. They ran for just under 200 yards as a team. Riley Leonard was a good game manager, right? 200 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 INT. But overall, he kept them in the game. And we all talked about the defense for Notre Dame, and they did exactly just that. They only allowed 63 rushing yards on 27 carries, only a 2.3 average. And in terms of their pass defense, Curtis Rourke, 215 yards, 20 of 33 completion, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. So he's able to get something going here a little bit later in the game. But overall, Notre Dame, they look good. They look like a really just tight-knit team, and they look sharp. So I think that they're coming in with a lot of momentum. As we said earlier, Georgia Tech and Georgia had that instant classic almost a month ago at this point, and hopefully you think Georgia is ready, that they don't have any rust from sitting on the sidelines for that long. Like I said, Notre Dame's a little bit more, they're fresher. They're going to be fresh in Georgia, but in terms of play time, obviously Notre Dame played last week, so they're going to be ready to go. But I think this is going to be a good game here. This might be the game of the week, but I'm excited to see how this one's going to go. Brand new quarterback at Georgia, so we'll see how he can do, Mr. Gunnar Stockton. We'll see what you got.
Stephen, your thoughts here. Let's start with Notre Dame. Ever since week number 2 and that loss to Northern Illinois, they've been focused. They've been dominant in many cases, and they certainly proved that against Indiana last week.
Yeah, well, being, I guess, the resident historian here, I'm reminded that in January 1st, 1981, Georgia played Notre Dame in, I think, the Sugar Bowl.
Yep.
Was Herschel Walker leading the Bulldogs to their first ever national championship over Notre Dame. So you have the ramifications of that game, and it's always fun when the Southeastern Conference plays Notre Dame, because it's two great teams. Now, getting back to something else that Logan mentioned, Carson Beck being injured, and this harkens back to a subject that I was talking about over the last couple of weeks, which is playing a lot of games. And so here you have a NFL prospect who has been injured, and it's setting him back. And hopefully he will recover and be able to play. But this is a kid who's played a lot of football games in 2024, and now he's hurt. He can't play in the biggest game so far of the year. So this gets back to what I had talked about earlier. Let's cut out the conference championship games. It's one less game that you really don't absolutely have to have in order to form, a vote, which is what we have to determine who the 12 best teams are. And let me also say this. I have no problem with the Big Five championship teams being in this pool. I don't, however, think they should automatically be given a bye. I think they should be thrown into the mix, and it should be determined by whatever experts are out there where they are. And they should play, especially if you're not going to play a conference title game. Although I think this is a dream of mine because it's just too much money in it. But I don't think it automatically means that you get a bye in that first game. Georgia and Notre Dame, I think a lot of people are going to want to see Georgia win. In the SEC, there's going to be this desire for the dominance of the Southeastern Conference to continue to prove that the beyond the Nick Saban era, beyond the Alabama dominant era, the conference will continue to be as good as it has been.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of things there. I mean, the Florida situation, throw in Kentucky, let's say, LSU, of course, A&M, who we talked about a little bit. There's so many good schools in the conference that can play. South Carolina and Alabama were right there on the cusp. It's hard to argue for the SEC not to be able to say we've got the best football top to bottom of any conference, period. That speaks volumes. But you also bring up very interesting points of how do we fine-tune this system to where I would agree with you, I think. But is it based on ranking? And who's doing the ranking? Is it the 10 or 11, 12 people that are a part of the committee? Sometimes they don't see things as clearly as others because Boise being ahead of Clemson, let's say, or Ohio State, sometimes it doesn't make sense. So we'll be looking at how they tweak and modify this to, I don't know if they'll ever get it perfect, but I want it better. That's what I want. I want a better system than what we've had in the past. That's the whole reason for doing this in the first place. Stephen, am I out of my mind thinking that that's possible, or are there too many rules and regulations to allow for this to be meaningful and quick in terms of making adjustments so that we get a better focus on who the best teams are going to be and how we get them to play each other here at the end of the year?
No, you're absolutely right. I believe it was Steve Sarkisian who I heard quoted. I think it was Sarkisian, but it was somebody, one of the coaches was talking about what I just said, that there's really no reason for the conference champions to be just automatically put ahead. I mean, especially when you consider the history of the SEC, where you're in any given year, you've got 4 or 5 teams in the SEC are probably the 4 best teams in the country in any given year. And the only reason they're not all unbeaten is they've beaten themselves. And so that's what I was saying earlier. Georgia is going to be trying to uphold that level. But getting back to conferences, and we are looking here at Arizona State and Oregon, okay, are going to be playing. And this reminds me again, as I'm the resident historian, I recall the 1969 season, which was the last year of the American Football League. And in this great documentary, Full Color Football, I believe it was Peter Coyote was the narrator. And he said that as the Kansas City Chiefs had defeated the Minnesota Vikings in the final game before they realigned the NFL into conferences, they had assumed dominance as the best league of the two leagues, just as the league folded. The AFL folded and became the American Football Conference, and that was the end of their 10-year run. So, which gets me to Oregon versus Arizona State. This is the Pac-12 conference.
Yes, it is.
This is the best year the Pac-12 conference has had since USC was dominant. They've got the number one team, and they have this ascendant Sun Devil team that has won their conference, and they're going to be playing Texas. And my gosh, imagine if the Pac-12 wins the college football playoff. I mean, I think it was an absolute disaster that the Pac-12 was disbanded. I mean, with all of its tradition and all, and I talked about my friend Terry Marks, who was almost the commissioner, and if he had been the commissioner, he would have kept that league going. He would have had a television deal with the networks, just like the SEC, but it wasn't to be. And yet here we are, just as the AFL folded. It's just they were the best. Here is the Pac-12 conference making a bid to show that they're as good as everybody else, just as they'd folded because they weren't as good as everybody else. So we're seeing two teams from that conference who will be competing, and I think that's a very interesting storyline. It's certainly the one that interests me the most.
Steven, real quick, go back to you. One quick thought. Logan brought up just a moment ago the injury situation with Carson Beck. If there's any advantage to that Georgia was able to utilize, in my opinion, it's the time factor. In between when he got hurt in that championship game and when they play now with that week off that they had, there are certain coaches that if you give Bill Belichick 2 weeks to prepare for anybody, if you give Nick Saban 2 weeks, they'll find a way to beat you. I think Georgia has an advantage here from the injury perspective. Yes, they're going to go with somebody who probably isn't as good as what Carson Beck has been over this past season, but they have time enough to be able to get him game ready. And that to me, as opposed to them playing last week and having, if they had to play either Notre Dame or Indiana, I think we'd be talking about a different scenario with Georgia. Give me real quick thoughts on your perspective, at least for the time perspective, and Georgia being able to recalibrate their offense based on the injury.
Well, looking at it from the athlete's perspective, there is nothing like getting an opportunity, because if you're the second string quarterback at Georgia, you are just itching to get in there. You believe in yourself. You've been a good high school player. You've been through the system. You've been coached. You're prepared. And you want that opportunity. And so you've seen throughout history a player who comes in and he was not the starter. I can remember UCLA winning beating USC back in the 1960s when their Gary Beban had been injured, and they pulled some guy, out of their second string, and he beat the Trojans. And these are enormous opportunities for these athletes. And so this young man is going to enter this game. Now, Texas obviously has a second string quarterback who is probably as good as anybody in the country, and he's already gotten some snaps and shown how good he is. So if that were to happen to Texas, I don't think they would miss a beat. So we're gonna look with interest to see whether Georgia can make the most of this opportunity, because that's really what it is you're in there and you're an athlete and you're competitive, and I'm as good as that guy. You might not be running around school telling everybody I'm as good as Carson Beck, but in your heart, you feel you are, and you have to. if you're going to be good, if you're going to be a good athlete, you have to feel that you're as good as anybody out there. You have to just believe in yourself to the nth degree. So I think this is going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I think there's a certain humility that most guys have on the outside. Oh, shucks, I'm just looking forward, gosh, maybe to getting an opportunity, gosh, whatever. But then when the ball is in his hand, you want that killer. You want the guy that's going to be just a dominant force. And I agree with you, Steven. I don't think there's any team in this playoff, or maybe even in college football, that's as well prepared for a quarterback injury as what Texas is, in terms of, having Arch Manning just chomping at the bit, waiting for his time. But Logan, let's go back to you real quick. I think the time advantage that Georgia has, Bill Russell said this many years ago. During the 1980 playoffs in the NBA, the Lakers, without Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, traveled to Philadelphia, then played the 76ers for really the NBA title. They had already won 3 games. If they win game 6, they'll be NBA champions. So someone asked the Philadelphia coach, I believe it was Cunningham at the time, so what do you think? And then they asked Bill Russell. And Bill goes, I'm not so worried about the team that I see and the one that I know. It's the team that I don't know. That's what I'm worried about. And they weren't quite sure how the Lakers were going to come out. It turns out Magic Johnson played a little bit of center, power forward, small forward. He was point guard. He did a little bit of everything, and Philadelphia didn't prepare for that. So is Notre Dame at a disadvantage by not knowing enough about Georgia's quarterback situation to where I think Georgia should be able to take advantage of that, as opposed to Notre Dame not being able to do that because they don't have enough film and they don't have enough experience about what Georgia may want to do now when they run their offense here in this game on Thursday?
Yeah, I believe Notre Dame is going to be at a slight disadvantage just because you haven't seen much of Gunnar Stockton play. You saw him play a little bit in the previous game, but that wasn't a large sample size, right? He hasn't played, he hasn't started just, filler games that Georgia, if they're, he really only gets, he only plays whenever Georgia's up 42-0, right? Or anything like that. And Georgia hasn't done much of that this year. It's been a tight season for them. So you haven't seen a whole lot of film. And I think for Georgia, if you coach smart, if you're the rest of the coaching staff, you have to play to your advantages. Like I said, he's been the backup quarterback. And like you said, Steven, he's been waiting. At least I hope he's been waiting to say, look, this is going to be my team. I'm going to take this over and I'm going to lead this team to a championship. So they're going to play to his strengths. And I mean, we saw just in very limited action that he's not afraid to zip the ball, right? He's got a fast arm. He can throw it with some power. So I like what the small size I've seen from Gunnar. But I expect, heavy dose of the running game, maybe early on, see if you can, if you can punch through the line of the defense. And if the running game's working, great. I would say run game heavy first. If that doesn't work, you do have him in the back pocket and see what he can do. But I think that Notre Dame, they are at a disadvantage because you haven't seen much of Gunnar Stockton play in his University of Georgia career.
Yeah, all you can do is say, this is what we've seen on film, and these are a certain amount of plays that we're going to do, but we think he's going to run this, and you have to prepare for something, and Georgia may not actually run any of those plays. They'll run a few, but they're not going to run all of them because they're not going to be telling Notre Dame what to do. So let me start by saying, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I said on Thursday, I meant Wednesday, of course. January 1st is a Wednesday. I got my days mixed up, so I apologize for that. Well, guys, real quick, before we move on, we've taken care of what I'm looking at on the right side of the bracket. Give me your thoughts on the left side. Ohio State, Oregon, Arizona State against Texas. Quick perspective on what's going on that side of the bracket before we wrap up the show. Logan, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, for Ohio State, I'll touch on them. They just flat out embarrassed Tennessee. Unfortunately for all the Vols fans out there, they just took care of business. I mean, 42-17 in a blowout. Ryan Day had his team ready. They were on fire last week. Honestly, look, when you score 21 points in the first quarter, it's going to be a pretty good day, you would think, and that just kind of continued. A lot of credit goes to Will Howard. I mean, pretty much spotless, right? Beside the one interception, over 300 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, really good completion percentage as well. So he really stepped up, and I know he's faced a little bit of criticism this year for maybe some subpar play, but he really showed it when it matters most. The running game, as we said, with Travion Henderson, he looked really sharp also. And also the defense. You only give up 17 points, so you're doing your job. You get 4 sacks on the day as well. So you're able to penetrate the O-line there for Tennessee, which is a really good team, and you were able to take care of business like nothing. So I think Ohio State and Oregon, I'm looking forward to that one. That one's going to be an absolute classic. We saw early in the year these two teams playing. Oregon got the very, very narrow 1-point win at the end there. So this one's going to be, I think, another chapter in this book here, and it's going to be a fun game. Oregon, Ohio State, that one is going to be can't miss TV right there. I'm going to be glued to the screen. And then I'll go down and talk about Texas and Arizona State. Texas took care of business, 38 points against Clemson. And we talked about the quarterbacks, right? We talked about Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers, but that wasn't really what impressed me with Texas last week. It was the running game. Good grief, 48 carries, 292 yards, 4 touchdowns. Clemson couldn't stop them. So if their running game is that good, and you have a really good quarterback, everyone's talked about Quinn Ewers, who he has struggled at times, but he took care of business. He did his job against Clemson. It's going to be tough for Arizona State to stop. And for the Sun Devils, look, I don't hear really anyone talking about them, honestly. I really don't. And it's kind of a shame because of how well they've done this year. We've talked about Ashton Genty earlier and how he's the best running back in college. Well, Arizona State has probably, I would say 1A and 1B, 1B being Cam Scatterbo. Is a tremendous running back who's got 1,500 plus yards and 19 rushing touchdowns, averages 6 yards per carry. So that's an absolute tank in the backfield there. They have a really good quarterback on their team as well as Sam Levitt. But two key notes, is their top receiver, Jordan Tyson, was injured in that game against Arizona. Not sure if he's going to be able to play in this game or not. It has been confirmed that I've seen if he's going to suit up or not. I'm sure if he's able to, he will. But it was an upper body injury, so we'll see how that can affect him being a wide receiver. But he's a very talented player, their top receiver by far. So hopefully he is going to be healthy. And also another thing, too, when I was looking at just the stats for Arizona State, is they have to have a better, reliable kicking game on the season. And I don't really look at kicking games much unless it's these big type of games like this. And this is a huge moment here. So on the season, Arizona State, their kicking unit is only 9 of 17 on the season for field goals. That's only 52.9%. So it has to be close. It has to pretty much be a chip shot, I would think, if you want it to go through the uprights and for them to get points. If it goes 40, if it goes 50, you might be playing, you might be a little shaky out there. So just 2 key points to look out for that one. But I think Arizona State, I think they'll put up a good fight, but I think Texas is just too overpowered. But for the Ohio State and Oregon matchup, that's just a toss-up, guys. You just flip a coin 100 times, they'll go 50-50, I think. That's just how even those two teams are.
Well, the first loss that Ohio State took this season, Steven, was against Oregon. In the game in Eugene, this one will be obviously a neutral site. It was a 1-point, 32-31. Oregon comes from behind and gets 10 points in the fourth quarter to Ohio State's 3. Your thoughts here on this rematch?
Yeah, I see. I'm rooting for Oregon. My daughter went to the University of Oregon before she transferred to Culinary Academy, and I'm a Pac-12 guy. So I'm rooting for Oregon versus Arizona State. But I think this is going to be a big game for Ryan Day, the coach at Ohio State. He's under the gun, and going undefeated in an entire college football season, including these playoffs, is a very difficult proposition. And Oregon is good, and they probably should be favored, but I think Ohio State has a very good chance, and I would actually favor them slightly. Getting back to something we were talking about earlier, and of course, you guys, I always get back to USC, but that's just the way I am. We were talking about looking at film. And so the Georgia quarterback, there's going to be more film on him than there were some years ago. There's going to be a lot of film on him from practices and from high school, and there's just more information available. Reminds me of 1971 when the Trojans played Alabama in the rematch from the game in Birmingham, and Alabama sent the film to John McKay, and they watched the typical typical Alabama offense. They prepared for the same offense that Bryant had run all year. In the meantime, Bear Bryant throws a big tarp over his practice field. There was no press, no one was there. They get out to the Coliseum, they're running the wishbone. So that was a situation that probably wouldn't happen anymore. But I think Ohio State is another team, like I'd mentioned, Boise State. They're going to come out with a chip on their shoulder, and I think Oregon is really going to have their work cut out for them.
Yeah, a couple of great games on all sides of the bracket. Let's be honest. The 4 games that are going to be taking place, you've got Fiesta, Rose, Sugar Bowl. What am I missing? The Rose Bowl, Mercedes-Benz, that's the Peach Bowl, excuse me. So we've got a lot to look at. And we also have about 20 other non-playoff bowl games that'll be taking place here in the next week. What a busy week we have. Logan, final thoughts from you.
Man, if we've been saying it, but if you're a college football fan, this is your week. This is your weekend. I mean, it's not just Saturdays anymore, right? This is weekdays going into weekends, going into a new year. So a lot of great games to watch this weekend. Obviously, we got the big ones here, the college football playoff, but be sure to go check out some of the many other bowl games we mentioned here today. A lot of really good talent that you might not have heard of, you might not have seen before, playing on some smaller schools and some of these other bowl games that you can check out. And maybe you could be impressed by them and put them on your draft board here around the corner in the NFL draft and say, oh, hey, I remember seeing that guy at the Fenway Wasabi Bowl or the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl or the Pop-Tarts Bowl. So a lot of great football, and I'm looking forward to it. It's a great time. And like you said in the opening, Harper, if you have anything to get done important, get it done early, because there is a mega list of games to get through here in the next handful of days.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steven, there's an old Thanksgiving, and it applies to Christmas too, host saying that says, if you leave hungry, that's your fault, because I'm going to put the food out there. You're going to get plenty to eat. If you don't like college football this week and you're going to complain about not getting a lot of football games to see, that's your fault, because there is plenty. Final thoughts from you, Steven.
Well, Logan reminds me of, and I mentioned this earlier, like some of these other games that are not the top tier games, yet are worth watching. And what did I talk about earlier when I was 11 years old and being riveted to the screen watching Alabama and Oklahoma in the Astro Bluebonnet Bowl? And so there's some kid out there, some 11-year-old kid, who's going to be watching the Wasabi Bowl or whatever it might be, and he's going to fixate on some player and he's going to watch it. Now, my last thought, I see that it's Arizona State against Texas, and the coach at Texas is Steve Sarkisian, who had a checkered history at the University of Southern California. And Harper, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think there was a particular moment on a tarmac, I believe, with Mr. Sarkisian. I think it was after a loss to the Arizona State Sun Devils, I think. I don't have it in front of me, but that's maybe I'm wrong on that. But I wonder if that could play into any of the psychology on January 1st.
Wouldn't you know it, Steven? You come up with one of those rare facts where I believe it was Pat Hayden said, "Hey, Mr. Sarkisian, you can find another way to get home. We're going to be moving on without you." My goodness, yeah, it was against Arizona State. At least that's my recollection of it. So yeah, wouldn't it be great for Steve on his own just to get the motivation going with a couple of those players to go, yeah, well, if this means a little bit more, but maybe it would be rather against SC. As opposed to Arizona State. But Gosh, guys, there's so much to do, and we could talk about it for a lot longer, but we're not going to. We're going to close this show out with a very special Merry Christmas thoughts that we have to everybody. We hope you and your family had a wonderful holiday season, and the football portion kicks into full gear here. So with a minus today that we didn't have Vincent Turner, our host and founder, he's visiting family. So we wish all the best for him and safe travels. But for Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, I'm Harper LeBel saying thank you for tuning in to Take 5 with Steven Travers. Steven, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. We appreciate it. We hope everybody has a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in to 100 Yards of